Welcome to my Mbuna tank. I don't talk about it much on the channel these days because I'm always working on experiments in the basement. And before I consider a change to the tank over the summer, I wanted to document the tank for you guys and explain what's been going on with these awesome fish. There's been a few minor changes to the rock placement over the years, but by and large this is the same hardscape and substrate setup from my overhaul in early 2020. Before that, this was my very first planted community tank, and the reason I got back into the hobby in the first place was because of the enjoyment I had sat in front of this very tank recovering from ankle surgery. But now that it is a Malawi aquarium, it has to be set up quite differently from those early days. I am now using Millennium Stone and Limestone with a custom stone effect background, and the substrate is just a mixture of black gravel and sand. The limestone helps to just slightly raise my pH up to around 8.1, which is a perfect environment for Mbuna. I do partial 20% water change on this tank once every 6 weeks, and the tank is filtered by an old Fluval 306, which I bought second hand and still runs perfectly due to my care and attention during maintenance. Behind the rocks on the left is also a cave system of plastic piping which my Pleco chocolate drop enjoys spending most of his time in. Keep your eyes peeled and he might make an appearance, but he is a pretty grumpy old man these days. Obviously the main focus of this tank is the fish, and we'll get to them just shortly. But one of the main issues with Mbuna is finding plants that enjoy the same water conditions and that won't get devoured by these bullish veggies. For quite some time I didn't really bother with any plants in this tank for that very reason, but I've gradually experimented and found things that the Mbuna won't destroy. They're not in the best of nick because I've just left them be, but in this tank currently we have tufts of Volbitis hugeloti attaching itself well to the rocks and creating little sanctuaries for some of the shyer fish. We then have Vallisneria trailing along the top, which is planted into little sock planters behind the rocks. I suspect they need a refresh of fertiliser tabs fairly soon though. But nobody looks at this tank for the plants. The fish are the main event, and we now have 5 generations of Mbuna living in here. First up we have the electric yellow labs, or Lobinochromis ceruleus. The bright yellow dominant male can be seen swimming around the middle of the tank, but the females are often hiding behind the rocks and are pretty shy. Then we have the Dogtooth Cichlid, or Cynnotilapia afra. As the name suggests, these are dogged little fish. The dominant male is the blue and black striped one, which you can see occasionally chasing others around the tank. He basically has the fish equivalent of small man syndrome. He is nowhere near the largest fish in the tank, but he always acts like he is. Now for quite some time these were the only fish in the tank. I've lost a couple over the years and there was a time when this tank caused me a lot of stress. Despite initially overstocking the tank to reduce aggression, it was never fully successful. The male dogtooth in particular behaved like a nasty piece of work for quite some time, and there were points when I seriously considered taking these fish back to the shop and giving up, because it just didn't seem like a good environment for these fish to flourish in. But after a bit of reading, I settled on a different approach. You see, I'd initially chosen smaller dwarf Mbuna genuses and was reluctant to get any larger Mbuna because of the tank size, which is fairly small at just 120 litres. But then I read that the blue dogtooth might be calmed down quite substantially if he had to live alongside a similarly coloured but larger male of a different genus. And so I picked up Dopey McDopeface II. He is the large Orange Cap Pseudotropheus perspicax that you can often see guarding the right-hand cave where his partner is tending to yet another school of fry. Long-time viewers might recall that when this aquarium was a community tank, the original Dopey McDopeface was a large Crebensis, but it was definitely the boss of this tank. And that is just what this Orange Cap Pseudotropheus is. The boss. He very rarely shows any aggression, but he won't put up with any messing around either. Since having him in the tank, it's become a much calmer and relaxed tank to watch. Of course you still get the occasional Mbuna aggression, but it's nothing like a few years ago when I was close to giving up on my dream Malawi tank entirely. And I guess what I like most about this tank is how well established and balanced it is. I've had 4 schools of fry hatch in the tank, and a couple from each school have reached maturity each time. Ultimately, this shouldn't have too much of an impact on the stocking and means that eventually this tank will be almost entirely homegrown Mbuna. Of the 4 schools, I think 1 was of yellow labs, 2 were dogtooths, and 2 were Pseudotropheus, so we should continue to get a nice mix of Mbuna as they mature. See if you can spot the various babies darting about. The oldest fry are now fully mature and about 2 centimeters long, and there are some 1-month-old fry no bigger than my little fingernail swimming around there too. I love watching them grow up and seeing how they gradually build in confidence. They start out clinging to the rocks, barely coming out from their shelter, and then eventually start adventurously darting between the rocks. I have never seen any adult aggression towards a fry, but simple maths tells me that we don't have a full survival rate. Ultimately though, this tank is finding a balance, and that's what I like about it. So for my next overhaul, I'm considering a completely fresh look. I want to keep the background and some of the limestone for water conditioning, but I'm considering a completely new, more natural sand substrate and seeing if we can grow anything else in the tank to make it a little more exciting. So let me know in the comment section below what you would do with this tank, and do you have any Mbuna safe planting recommendations? And if you want to see the early days of this tank, the top card documents the very day I took delivery of these awesome Mbuna, or the bottom card is my latest video. Cheers.